Welcome to Safe Coalition, Confronting Our Crisis. I'm Ann Bergen, co-host of this program, along with Jim Derrick, who is the president of the Safe Coalition, with the purpose promoting the mission of the Safe Coalition, which is to support individuals and families as they struggle with the disease of substance use disorder, providing treatment options, and most of all, making sure the public really understands the impact of this disease, this epidemic. Also, making people aware of the many misconceptions about this disease and erasing the stigma that's so often associated with substance use disorder. And we know now more than ever that the power that individuals can generate at the local level. I came across this quote this morning, and it said, "The muscles meet and miracles invariably happen at the local level." And it's when compassion and love are turned into action. And I also did come across this quote, Nelson Mandela, I like it. "It is the difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead." Our guest today is determined to make a difference by sharing her story of recovery, to motivate and inspire others, but especially to help us understand the nature of this disease. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jim, to introduce our guest today.
Thank you, Ann, and I love the Nelson Mandela
Isn't that a
quote
good
as
one?
well. I
love
sure
that
do.
quote.
So September's Recovery Month, and we've been pulling from a variety of stories from across the country that are very, very inspiring and motivating. But frankly, none is more motivating than the one that we're about to share. I happen to know this young lady very, very well, Mandy Lerner. Welcome, Mandy.
Thank you.
And thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Mandy and I met. We'll talk a little bit about how we met later on, because that's an integral part of the story. But Mandy has the courage to come on and share her recovery story with the hopes that others will hear it and be inspired. And we're hoping you'll do that today. So, Mandy, tell us a little bit about where you grew up and your early years forming as a child here in Franklin.
Well, as I was saying before, I actually grew up in Franklin. I moved here. I attended the Franklin schools from 1st through 5th grade. Mm-hmm. My parents did separate, so we moved down the Cape. So I was transferred to schools in Sandwich. Kind of part of my story is things got a little crazy for me in high school. That was when I started experimenting and using. It actually started before high school, but it really kind of got out of control in high school. I mean, I was dabbling into whatever I could find. My senior year, the beginning of senior year, they asked me to leave. I was going to school under the influence every day. I was leaving school. That was really when my problems started, but of course, I didn't recognize them at that point. I was sent to detox at 17, so you would think that would kind of clue me in on what was going on. Right. But I just thought, it's my parents. They're trying to scare me.
And that's such a young age, Mandy. And before we came on the air, we were talking. Mandy was sharing with me that you felt that you were born almost an alcoholic, right?
Absolutely. I wouldn't have said that at that point, but now looking back and knowing what I know and kind of what I've been through these last X amount of years, I know that I had alcoholic tendencies from a very young age. And absolutely all through high school. I mean, these were all of my behaviors were alcoholic and addict behaviors. I mean, 100%. This is something that you're born with.
So in your experience, this isn't a choice.
Absolutely not.
In terms, you had exposure, and that was enough.
There are certain choices that you make that obviously, but this is not a choice. I mean, this was...
Can I just ask you something as an educator and someone, because obviously Jim invited me to be part of this because our goal is to look at prevention and early intervention and things like that. You mentioned that you even began sort of even before high school. Can you, when you reflect and think about what you were going through sort of emotionally, you said it was kind of a mess. Can you, because it's helpful to us to understand what young people go through and why they need to sort of use substances. Can you reflect and think back to when you said it was a mess, or because there's something that was happening?
Well, I've done a lot of reflecting, and I I've talked about, I didn't suffer any major trauma,
Right,
but there was
right.
definitely a lot going on. And at a young age, I was dealing with, my parents separated when I was 10.
It's a huge thing.
That
It's
was
huge.
That was a big thing for me, and I had an older brother. My brother and I kind of, it definitely affected us. It affected our relationship. We all, was it our fault? Did we do something? Why is this happening? And my father, he's sick, and it was right around the time that he was diagnosed that he and my mom separated. So that was, I feel like he had kind of a midlife crisis, and we kind of got the brunt of that. So I think the divorce was a big thing for us. Moving schools at a young age, I kind of felt like I never fit in. I never had the opportunity to form these friendships that, these children had all been to school since preschool, kindergarten, and here I am in 5th grade, moving, not knowing anybody, shy, confused, scared. And that was really when things started to change for me. I competitively, I rode horses, and I competed at a national level.
Wow.
And I think that was also very, it gave me a lot of insecurities, because I always felt like I was never good enough. It was never enough, and it was just constant competition, and it was a lot for a young person to go through. And my grandfather died. There was just all these things that happened when I was young, and I didn't know how to handle it.
For lack of a better
I didn't have close
term,
friends.
It almost sounds like the perfect storm.
Exactly.
Because here you have this, forget the predisposition, you have the disease of addiction and alcoholism
Right,
from a
my
very young
mind's
age.
already.
You're drinking to blackout drunk
Right.
before you're
Right.
even a teenager.
And that's really when it started. I mean,
And you've got the environmental factors.
But that's huge, because and that's something we as educators have to look at and understand. Particularly, we've so underestimated the impact that divorce has on. Having gone through a
Right.
divorce with my own daughter, and I thought it didn't affect her. I just convinced myself I was wrong, and I look back on it, and then you compound it by everything else. But I think we as educators, and when we're looking for intervention, is to really talk to young people and find out what they're going
Right.
through, and to help them kind of manage this, and get through
exactly.
it.
Well, it wasn't talked about either.
Right,
So
no.
it really wasn't. And it was soon after that, because that was 5th grade. I was 10. It was soon after that. I think I was 11 or 12 when I started to use. I started, it just started with, I was smoking weed, I was drinking here and there, whatever
Yeah.
I could find. And then high school is when even freshman year, I'm 14, and I'm just doing anything I can to get my hands on whatever I could. And nothing was really recognized. My mom was depressed from the divorce, and just,
Another factor that contributes to it when you
Right,
look at
she
it.
was
it's
very
the
upset,
mental-
and-
yeah.
I appreciate you bringing that up and your candor and all that. And I get asked a lot at Learn to Cope meetings, and even in my role as a Safe Coalition, where are the parents in all this? And as a parent, I can tell you that it's just not that easy. But I'm wondering if you could reflect a little bit on, was there any spike strips or roadblocks that could have been put up in your way to stop you?
I don't think so. I was, even at that age, even that young, I was a liar. I was a manipulator. I was, I thought I had it all. I had covered every, my mom would ask me something, I'd lie. I'd sneak out of the house, I'd skip school, and I'd cut the phone line so the school wouldn't call home to tell my mom I wasn't there. Like, just went through so much just to hide what I was doing.
Right.
And like I said, my mom was alone with my brother and I in high school, not easy ages, so she had her hands full too, and she was upset going through what she was going through. And I honestly don't think that she knew,
Right.
even still probably doesn't know all that was going on and
Right.
exactly what I was doing, or that it was that
And
bad.
it's so important what you just said, because this is not a discipline issue. You
No.
don't ground an addict and alcoholic and
No.
have them get well any more than you ground somebody with mental illness, which
Right.
we're talking about mental illness and mental health here. You can't discipline your way out of this. You can't love your way out of it. You can't scream your way out of it. And unfortunately, this is an illness in you that is now gathering momentum and gathering steam. And now you're a teenager, and you start to suffer some real consequences right through high school.
I did, yes. So I somehow made it up until my senior year, and they asked me to leave. I was going to school under the influence. I had to switch schools. I was sent to detox, And then when I moved to the Franklin school system, the credits were different. So I actually had to do an extra year of high school. I had to return as a junior. And I had, remember, grown up here, so I knew a lot of the people in the high school from being young, and now they're all a year ahead of me because I had to do an extra year, which it is what it is. But I think that was hard on me too, because I was new and alone again, and anybody that I knew was graduating, and here I am a junior again. And at this point, so I'm 17, 18, and I have already been to detox. I've switched, now I'm living with my dad, who I hadn't lived with in years. I'm not with my mom, just all these things going on, and I'm alone and I'm new at school again. And it's high school, which is like so hard to be, you know,
Absolutely.
it's just such a awkward and hard time, and people are kind of mean. So, you know, I felt I was very alone again. So at that point, you know, I'm fresh out of detox, and I did stay sober for a couple of months, and then I made some friends, and of course I went out, and my first night out, I'm drinking, I'm using cocaine, I'm doing whatever I can to get, and that's, you know, that's just part of the insanity of it. I had just gotten out of detox. I'm 17 years old, and my first time out, my dad let me borrow his car. I didn't have a car at that point, and I'm driving his car under the influence. 17.
And what few people understand, few people outside of people that are impacted directly like you, is that this is an illness that tells you as loudly as you can imagine that you don't have an illness. So
Absolutely.
what you and I see, and even Mandy today, we were talking earlier before we went on camera, that there are some experiences that you look back at and you say, what the heck was I thinking?
Absolutely
But in that
insane.
moment, you were 100% convinced that even though you've been to detox, that was a mistake.
That was just someone's trying to scare me,
Right.
or, you know, it's a vacation. You know, it's nothing serious. I'm fine.
But this isn't a criticism of the school at the time, but I'm just curious if when you came and people realized your history and stuff to help ease the transition, that if there was someone you could have talked to right from the beginning and
There
to say,
should have been.
right?
There should have been.
Absolutely.
That's
And
really interesting.
And honestly, this wasn't. Then it wasn't what it is now.
Right.
You know, and I was very quiet and secretive about what I was doing. My friends weren't doing what I was doing. I was an isolator. I was using on my own,
Right.
or with the boys. The girls didn't do that. You know what I mean? So this was I was very secretive about what I was doing. Some people knew, most didn't, but the school definitely found out, especially
knew.
when I would bring water bottles, Poland Spring bottles filled with vodka to school. I'm 16, 17, and I'm drinking in the morning at school. Like, that's sickening.
It sure
Sickening.
is, yeah.
So, but I didn't think at that point, I still didn't think that I had a problem. You know, I don't like school. You know, just
But I think it was interesting what you said. It's not a discipline issue, and yet
no.
You had all the symptoms when you were at the Cape and you were asked to leave. You know, you wouldn't ask a cancer patient
That's a
to
great
leave.
point.
You wouldn't, you know, to say,
Exactly.
okay, you have cancer, now you have to leave my school. You know, I mean,
Right.
when you look back and say, you know, wrong, it was just, we just didn't have enough understanding,
They
which
had
is
no
why these
understanding.
conversations are so
They,
important.
they really
right?
are, and it's why, you know, our work with the task force, with the Franklin Public Schools Task Force, is really an effort to understand this, but it can't be done in a vacuum, which is why it's so important to have people like you with experience, strength, and hope to come and share that, because it's one thing to talk about it on a whiteboard, and it's another thing to have a product sitting in front of you saying, "Yeah, there could have been something done."
But you know what the big thing too is, which just in the conversations I have out in the public with people, is they don't understand the whole process of recovery, and they think, oh, you just stop.
That's right.
Right. And that, can you talk about that process when you know, of when that decision is made and what you have to go through in order, because people don't understand that.
There's no just stopping. It doesn't work
Right.
like that. If it was that easy, we wouldn't be in this situation, and there wouldn't be the issues that there are. I mean,
and you're 17 years old now. You're a otherwise healthy person, you know.
extremely,
But
right.
you have, and you've had some real consequences, and you're not just stopping.
not stopping me.
Yeah,
No.
that's not doing it, right?
It's not
like, yeah, you can
doing
punish
it.
the heck out of somebody. That's not
Right.
going to stop.
No. So at that point, I graduated high school finally after an extra year, and I have the brilliant idea to move to Providence and get my own apartment.
Right.
And that was another huge mistake that I made, because that was just, I'm completely free, So now, and I have, nobody there to watch out for me. And that's where things started to go even further downhill with the drinking and the partying and everything that I was doing. I had a couple of roommates who were great, but I couldn't figure out why they weren't like me and why they didn't want to drink every night and party and use whatever we could. And that ended up falling apart real quickly. And I was back home with my dad back in Franklin, which was embarrassing for me. I couldn't do it. And things started to continually get worse at that point. I think I'm 19, 20 at this point, and I'm just drinking. I finally turned 21, and then I can legally do it, so I'm just drinking years and years. Fast forward to 2012, I had neck surgery, and it didn't go well. I woke up and I couldn't move my arm, my neck. I don't need to go into detail, but the doctor had cut through my spinal accessory nerve and left it severed. So, and he knew, but didn't tell me. And he just overprescribed. I was prescribed Percocets nonstop. And that's when things, at that point, I would have told you that's when things in my life really went downhill. And that's when all the problems started. They started long before that, but that is when the opiate problem started for me. And I had said to Jim earlier this morning, I used opiates in high school. I was using OCs. I was doing everything, but I was putting things down and switching to other, this is where I had all of these pills, as many as I wanted. And that's when that's when it really got out of control. And then he cut me off. I had to have another surgery, so I was prescribed again. And then after they cut, the second doctor prescribed them normally, but once he stopped prescribing, that's when I went to heroin.
So now you're coming up to 2013, and you've developed a full-blown heroin addiction, which for anybody that's watching that isn't aware, opioids as a class, Percocet, OxyContin, Vicodin, that class of medication is synthetic heroin. The switch to heroin is made because it's cheaper, and certainly at that time a lot cheaper. It's still cheaper and more accessible. But it has some real consequences that you suffered.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you went on to heroin addiction. And how long were you using heroin?
5 years.
5 full years. Okay.
Right around 5 years.
Yeah.
And when people say that when you try to stop, the pain of stopping, don't you end up having? Isn't that people don't understand that?
It is.
You're not even taking it to get high anymore, just to keep.
Oh no, that stopped long before. It's maintaining. It's to not be sick, because the sickness is unlike.
That's what people don't
anything.
understand. That's it.
Insane. It's something that is. You can't really describe it, what it's like to be sick and what goes through your head and the insanity of, and just what you'll do to get what you need just to feel better. And that is what people don't understand. This isn't something that you can just stop. Your body is dependent on it. Your mind, it's just an insane situation. And combined with the mental illness part of it and the body, the physical dependency, it's scary. It's something that you can't just stop.
Now, along the way, Mandy, you're married and you have two beautiful children. I don't want to just fly by that because we will. This has a very, very happy ending, as you can tell as we're sitting here today. And how does that change, or does it change your addiction? We're talking about the power of this addiction, and if ever there was a time to stop, someone would say, "Well, my gosh, you have these beautiful little eyes looking up at you."
So you were still using when you got married and had your children. Oh, okay.
I was using them. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So
wow.
obviously both pregnancies were not planned, and yes, I was using at that time, and with my daughter it was a little bit different because I didn't find out that I was pregnant until I was pretty much halfway through my pregnancy. I was in a car accident. I had nodded off at the wheel, and I hit someone, and I had cramps in my stomach, and we went to the hospital, and that's when they said, you're very pregnant. So here I am, absolutely terrified, thinking, I'm such a failure, but I don't stop. I'm just the doctors called me one day after the ultrasound, and they told me that she had Down syndrome, trisomy 18, she had heart issues. They told me all these problems, and so I wasn't going to have her, because in my head, I'm a full-blown heroin addict. I have a young child. I had a stepson, and I'm thinking, how can I raise a little girl with these issues? So I actually went to a clinic, and I was there for 6 hours. I was not going to have her, and something, I don't know what happened, but I ended up leaving. I decided I was going to have her, and they monitored me. I did stop using for the end of that pregnancy, and I had her, and she is 100% healthy.
Oh, my.
Nothing.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
she was
So
gorgeous.
that was like, but I was actually just telling this story the other night. This is another part of how insane this disease is. So I stopped using for these last couple months of my pregnancy, and the night that she was born, I got high in the hospital bathroom. The night that she was born.
That obsession is unlike anything anyone can imagine, is it?
That entire the rest of that pregnancy, just waiting.
Right. And so the casual viewer might say, well, gosh, you were clean at that point. Why not just keep going? Because
Sick.
the obsession of the mind
It
and that
wasn't fixed.
core mental illness had yet to be treated.
Exactly.
That would be like asking an insulin-dependent diabetic to control their sugar levels without insulin. It just doesn't happen. So, that's where the rubber is really meeting the road, and now you're really up against it. You have the 2 children, and you're now raising these 2 young children as an addict. And you describe something that I think is really powerful and frankly moving to me, is the despair and the self-loathing that must have been going on in your mind. Because you're a great mom. I've seen you with the kids, and that didn't start just when you got clean and sober. Those instincts are there right from the beginning. Can you talk about how that self-loathing, that sort of that feeling plays into the addiction or feeds it, or if it does feed it?
This is something that, because obviously using with young children or children at all, that's one of my biggest regrets, one of my most embarrassing, one of the most embarrassing times of my life. Plus, here I am thinking that people don't know. So I'm out in public with my kids. I'm doing thinking that nobody has any idea what's going on. Raising 2 so my kids are 1 year apart, exactly a year and 2 weeks apart. So it was a hectic, crazy time. I had these 2 little babies. I'm still in pain from my surgeries because it wasn't treated properly.
Oh, yeah. Jeez.
So I still have issues with my arm. So here I am with 2 little ones, can't lift this arm. I'm self-medicating, obviously. I mean, my life was just chaotic and hectic and sad and lonely, and here I am also kicking myself every day, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? But never once did I ask for help. Never once did I know how to get out of this situation. Like, I thought this was it. This is what my life is going to be. I was living at the time with my ex-husband's in-laws. So here we are, a family living with my in-laws, using in their home, just complete insanity. And I just remember looking at my kids every night and it's just feeling so sorry, just so sad and so helpless.
So in looking at this whole history and everything that you went through, then ultimately you're here today and you're in recovery. Can you tell us just a little bit about the journey that once that you made the move to stop using, however it happened? Can you share that story with us?
It's an interesting story because there were quite a few factors that led to my getting clean. It was a process. I was actually caught in a sting that I didn't know about. There were undercover detectives that I actually thought were my drug dealers. I got into the car with them, realized that it wasn't who I expected, got out, My guys came, I got in their car, and then the police came. That's when I realized what was happening, that I was in trouble. But the amazing thing that happened was they weren't trying to get me in trouble. They gave me the option. You can either get help, we'll help you find help, or this can go a completely different way.
Wow.
And and this is a seismic shift, and this is why I'm having trouble controlling my emotion here today, because the first time I met Mandy was on the phone that night. And I have to say that this was, we were working with the police department very closely. Franklin Police Department. And we had only been in existence at that point for a couple of years. We had our support line available, and I've been working with the detectives. And it wasn't the first time I'd gotten a call, but I must say that it's the first time I got the call, and I've had the pleasure of seeing somebody afterwards in the result. The amazing thing to me, and Mandy and I were talking beforehand, is that things could have gone very, very differently if, in this case, the officer hadn't been concerned with treatment for you, right?
Absolutely.
And if they had arrested you, do you have a sense that might have sent you on a different path?
Absolutely, because the way that my mind works is anytime that something goes wrong or something, that's when things get worse for me. Mm-hmm. And if something had, if that played out differently, and if he had arrested me or, not showed the compassion and tried to help me and showed that he wasn't out to get me, because in my mind, everybody's out to get me, everybody's against me, I think my life would have just gone farther downhill. That to me was a pivotal moment. That's when I started, I don't want to say that's when I got clean, because it wasn't, but that's when I started to realize, maybe I can do this, but it did take a few tries. That wasn't the first phone call to you.
No, but so to be clear, what happened was the officer, Mandy, offered you treatment, right? And in an addict's mind, you say, absolutely, I'll get it tomorrow.
Yep.
Right? And so we spoke on the phone, and we located, through the Safe Coalition, we located a detox bed that was available, and you took that bed the next day. And the important thing to know about this story is that all we're offering is a resource. The coalition didn't do anything in that moment, but the resource was available, and the police were supportive, and then you have to get your courage to start your own recovery.
Exactly.
Which is not easy. That courage takes a tremendous amount of willpower and faith and guts to do, even with proper support.
Right.
So I think it's a long way of me saying that coalition building, that partnerships with police, schools, these conversations that we're having out in the open, the offer of help, are critically important, because you don't know when someone, an addict or alcoholic, has hit their bottom and is going to grab that lifeline, which is the hope that you're giving them in the form of resources. And that's what happened that night. And so I know how thankful you are for the compassion of the Franklin Police Department.
Very.
Not only that one time, but it did take a second time and a second phone call.
That's what it's important to understand. The first detox, how long was that stay that when you went in the first time? Do you remember?
I do. I completed the detox. I was moved over to CSS. I was there for, I think, total 16 days.
Just 16 days.
I was kicked out for saving my medications.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Just the addict mind. That's
the addict
mind.
Yep.
Saving it, cheeking it. I got caught in the med line and was kicked out. So this is how sick I was and how insane this disease is. I get out of detox. I'm far away from home. My phone's dead. The only phone number I know is my drug dealer. So I get out of detox after being clean for 16 days, and I call my drug dealer. And I blamed the detox center. They screwed me. How dare they kick me out when I'm trying to get clean? Just insanity.
Yeah. Not everyone else's fault.
Right, not mine.
No, because there's nothing wrong. And while we laugh about it, I mean, that's the illness.
So
That's
true.
like it's going full bore there. And that's still not the end of the story for you. You actually had to be sectioned, right?
I was in
Explain what
detox
that-
a couple more
yeah.
times after that. I reached out to you once or twice after that initial call. Was in detox January, February, March. I got out of my last detox center, I think it was April 1st. And I was sectioned 3 days later by my family at Section 35.
And that's an involuntary commitment when a family member feels that someone's in imminent danger. Imminent
Exactly.
danger.
Either
So
yourself or those around
Right,
you, or
right.
you're using as, you're in danger. So the police pick you up, they cuff you and shackle you, you're in a cell. It's the judge's decision whether or not you are committed. So I'm in the cell for probably 12 hours, and I still don't think I'm going anywhere. I think I've got this figured out. I've got it beat. I'm going home. I have kids. They can't do this to me. I'm not sick. I've only been out for 3 days. What do they think I'm doing? Just craziness. So a family member, they had contacted a few people. It was my mother and father. They sectioned me together, but the judge had contacted other family members, other people in my life, and there were allegations that I was driving under the influence with my kids. I was so mad, but that is part of what saved my life, because that is when the judge decided to commit me. And that is when they contacted DCF because there were accusations that I was driving under the influence with my children. But even still, I thought I was fine. And I thought, they check me in to the treatment center, and then they tell me I'm here for a minimum of 21 days, and I go berserk. I lose my mind. Are you insane? I'm fine. And still thinking in my head that they're insane. They are such jerks. Why am I here? F my parents. They're such, so angry and so mad at everyone but myself, blaming everyone but myself. And that entire first week, I was planning my escape, and no, I'm going to get out of here, and this isn't real, and I don't need this help, and I'm fine. And that's just how crazy it is and how sick I was. And it wasn't until somebody from DCF actually came to the treatment center and met with me that, that was kind of my moment, like, holy crap, I'm going to lose my kids if I don't get my butt in gear. And that's when everything changed for me there. It was, in that treatment center, you don't realize how many hours are in a day until you're in an institution for, I was there for, I think, they're supposed to hold you for 21. They held me for like 32. So it's like there's so many hours in a day to do nothing but think and reflect. And that was where, my spirituality kicked it. I found God there.
Did they do the 12-step program there? Or?
There they did not.
They
no.
did not. I was
No.
just curious, yeah.
No, but that is where, that moment where, that was my, rock bottom is kind of I had a lot of rock bottoms and a lot of bad moments, before coming into treatment. I have no car, I've lost my job of 8 years, I have no friends, I'm losing, my life is a disaster. But that moment where I almost lost my children was what...
Literally a come to Jesus moment.
Literally,
Yeah.
100%.
And so you describe the role of your spiritual life, and this is where the rubber really meets the road. Because up until now, we've talked a lot about the illness itself, and yes, we've talked about how some resources were available, and certainly, really thankful for the Franklin Police and their compassionate care, truly serving and protecting as opposed to arresting in this situation, which could have had another outcome. But here's where the rubber meets the road, because this is what's going to sustain you and heal you and brings you here today, which is the development of a spiritual self, self-reflection, and the courage, which is, can't underestimate. Nobody gets sober for somebody else. This is really, it's really a lonely at first process, right?
Very.
You find yourself all
Very.
alone. And I'm imagining this, a young mom who's basically lost everything.
Everything.
Literally, materially, her kids have been taken into custody, and you have to dig deep and say, I'm going to do something with this hand that's been
Yeah.
dealt me. What do you remember a shift, just a seismic shift in you where you said, this is it, I'm either going to live or die? I mean, was it that dramatic?
It is that dramatic, because that's literally what it is. It's life or death now. And here I am. I'm dropped off to my dad's house. I'm in his driveway with a trash bag of my belongings. I mean, that's what I owned, a trash bag filled with my life. And I'm in his driveway. My kids aren't there. My dad's not there. And I'm like, what now? You know, this is where it starts. That's where it really started, because now I'm, for the first time on my own, completely sober, and I'm starting over. And it was up to me. It's either you run scared back to what you were doing, or you do something. So I remember this was the beginning of May, and I had spent Easter in treatment, so I was like still devastated over that, and Mother's Day was coming, and I'm like, I have to do the right thing. So I remember I had no car, no job, nothing. So I remember every day I would walk. I had a backpack, that's all I had, and I would walk everywhere. I'd walk to meetings, I'd walk to women's support groups, I would walk to an DBT class, I was walking to the grocery store, I was walking. Everything I did, May, June, and July, I walked everywhere. You'd see me walking around town, doing my grocery shopping and carrying my bags. But that to me was like such an important part of my recovery, because that was like how bad I wanted it at that point. Like,
right.
I was willing to do, and they say, and it's so true, like they tell you, like in the halls, like chase your recovery like you would chase your drug of choice. And it's so true, and that's what I did, and I would hold on to that, and all those little sayings that they say in AA, like I would hold on to every single one of them, because that's what got me through, and I wanted it so bad, and all I wanted was my kids and a house and a job and everything back, that, you know, and I knew that if I did the right thing, I would get everything back at some point and more. So that is what pushed me. You know, I don't want to walk anymore. Like, I don't want to walk anymore. So finally, July, I get a car. I get a job, you know, a get-well job. I worked at a gym. So now I have a gym membership and a job. So it's like all these little things started happening. And then my boss, after, you know, I had done so much to this company. I'd been there for 8 years. They had seen me through my absolute worst. They gave me loans, they gave me this, they gave me that. I cried to them for this. I mean, they were just so incredible to me. And then they found out what was going on. I had been back and forth with that company. I lost the job, got it back, lost the job, got it back. So when my boss found out that I was in recovery, he contacted me, he gave me my job back.
Wow.
I'm still there. So it's
you
like,
talk about,
I mean,
he's
you know,
incredible.
and so there's
He's
another
incredible.
lifeline. There's another lifeline, right?
He understands. He has family. He has addicts in his family. So he understands, and he's compassionate, and he gets it, and he's
the
been
great
so
thing
good
is,
to me.
But these things don't just happen.
No.
We have to be in conversation. We have to, as we're doing, and that's what's changed dramatically from when I first encountered this environment with a family member. Is that over the past 5 years, thanks to you and other people in the community, the conversation's opened up, and it's okay to talk. Once you talk, like you said, you don't have to talk very long before you find a business owner who says, I have this in my family.
Right.
I get recovery. You need a job, I'll give you one.
Because that's
Right.
the toughest thing, isn't it? Because some people come in and they have a record, or they've DUIs,
Right.
and
It's so
people
hard.
do Corey checks, and then, no, we're not going to hire you. But when you have that compassionate, understanding human being that,
Now, Mandy, when I met you, I guess not on the telephone, but for the first time in person, I remember being shocked because someone said, you'll remember her. No, I don't. And then I heard the rest of the story. And you were at the beginning of your recovery at that point. And happily, I've gotten to know you very well since then. I'm so grateful for you and for your story. An important part of that story is, hopefully we've got the picture up right now, is your beautiful children. What has being a mom in sobriety felt like? I mean, the joy of recovery must be intense with these young kids.
It's incredible, because it's obviously the love and the passion, it was always there, but it's so amazing to be present and to be there for every moment and actually cherish it. I mean, I remember when I first got out, the first time that I saw them, just like the feeling of just like, oh my God, like knowing that you've almost lost them, to hold them and just like now I have, I've given them a home. We have a house together, me and my kids, and we have a nice home. I have them every minute of every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little crazy, but it's incredible. And it's just a different dynamic. I'm much more patient, tolerant, loving. Just, it's so different. And I feel like it's almost like kids have like this sense, they feed off of.
Most definitely.
So it's like a change in them as well. They were very little when this was going on, but I feel like they're happier. It's just it's a much happier home.
What I think people don't tend to understand too is, and you made reference to it, is that whole spiritual element. That's something that's missing from society today, because organized religion has gone, for many people, they're not kind of buying into it anymore, but that whole spiritual life, and you don't have to be part of any religion to have that, but just in talking to people in recovery, it seems that that's a huge part for so many people when they discover that spiritual, it's important, isn't it?
It's probably the biggest, that's what I hold on to, the praying. I pray every morning, I pray every night, I pray when I run into a problem, I pray when I'm, happy, mad, sad, everything. That's what keeps me going, and there's always time for that. So there's all these, you know what I mean? You can always fit in a quick prayer. So it's like
That's
that to me has been huge. And I wasn't brought up religious. I don't follow it. My mother's Protestant, my father's Jewish. I never went to church. I'm not a religious person, but I'm very spiritual.
Yeah.
And that's what.
So many people, they said that's a key to a lot of it, right?
Yeah.
And I remember talking to Derek when he was saying that one of the things for him is when he started to sort of not thinking so much about himself, the self-focus, and he started to thinking about that his job then was to go help other people. And that was part of his spiritual journey too, was to be helping other people. And that's certainly what you're doing today with us.
Mandy, September is Recovery Month, and I think it's important to let people know from your perspective that recovery is available. Because I think I meet a lot of people that are really, particularly parents and loved ones, despairing over their loved one's state and thinking this is got to be the worst case ever. What would you tell people that are battling right now in terms of recovery?
There is a way out. You do have to put the work in. It is something that it's not just going to happen. You don't just remove your drug of choice and everything's great. You have to. It's a mental sickness. You have to work on your mind. You have to take the time to, like I said, I was alone for a lot of time in the beginning of my recovery, and that to me, it was sad and it was lonely, but that was very important to me because I was able to reflect and I was able to find myself and my spirituality and get to know myself, because since I was 10, 11 years old, I haven't known who I was, So I think it's important for people to know that it's possible. There are people out there that care and that will help you, and there are resources that, you pick up the phone, you call someone. I know I have a couple of girlfriends that are in very early recovery, and that's been a huge thing, just to be able to pick up the phone when they call and to just talk them through something. They're having a hard time. Something's going on. I have plenty of difficult days and plenty of things that go wrong, but there are people out there that you can talk to. There are people that will support you and talk you through something. And I think it's just important to know that it's possible if you want it.
Right. And that's such an important message, because you're such a beacon of hope in this whole thing, and light, and these kids are just adorable. They're off the charts. But I'm really curious to know from your perspective, is it important, these conversations that we have, changing the environment, making stigma go away, is that important for recovery?
Extremely, because I think a big part of my delay in finding recovery was the shame, the embarrassment, the inability to reach out and say, I need help. If I wasn't in that situation with the police department, I don't think I would have asked for help. I don't think I would have, I don't know what would have happened, but it would have been bad. The police even went as far as keeping in contact with my dad checking in on me. How's she
Wow.
doing? Where is she? What's going on? I don't know how long they did that, but I know that they were in touch with my dad quite a few times just to follow up on
And working
how
with
I
the
was
Franklin
doing.
Police quite often, I will tell you this is not unique. They follow up all the time. They follow up
That's
with me. Do you
amazing.
know how so-and-so's doing? They follow up regularly. It's part of what they do, and to hear and to see the impact is really something in.
What I was going to ask both of you also is the Safe Coalition is so important in our community, and it's really just essentially volunteers, you being key to this whole thing. We have an epidemic. We have 72,000 people died last year alone, all this. What, if we're a community that works together and that cares and we want to be compassionate, what do you need? What does the Safe Coalition need? What are the services that we should be having in our town, or what are the key needs that the community can rally around to support the Safe Coalition and to people who are in recovery? What are the biggest needs so we can keep getting that message out to people?
It's a great question, and it's one that we wrestle with all the time. I can kind of quantify it this way. We have a lot of really, really great people around our table right now. Our board of directors has more than doubled in size. There is no shortage of people that want to help. Frankly, in my opinion, if you want to know somebody's priorities, you look at their checkbook. And that includes municipalities and businesses and all that. So funding is certainly important. I would love to see a day, this is me speaking, I would love to see a day when the coalition has paid employees that are providing direct social services to towns to help assist with reducing barriers to treatment, to help in the schools with education, bereavement support. We were fortunate to get a grant this year, and we are providing some of those services with outside and consulting firms. But I think it all boils down to what is the will of the community? Does the community actually recognize this as our nation's #1 health epidemic? And if so, where is the will to fight it? And it comes down to funding and volunteers. And right now we've got volunteers, but the funding's lacking. So it's kind of a vague answer. I think maybe it's not as targeted maybe as some might like, but I think the bottom line is this is happening right here in our community. I've had people come up to me recently and say, is that Safe Coalition still going? I mean, are we still in the middle of a problem? Yes, we are. The numbers are horrible right now. And so the question is going to be, over time, can we muster a combination of education and knowledge of what's going on? Can we convert that into a communal will to start supporting services that our citizens desperately need?
Because it's true, I think about the schools are being asked to solve, all of these issues, and if there could be places in the community. Several of those things that you listed, that early trauma, divorce, a mom suffering from depression, father, all of those things are contributing factors that virtually almost always lead to some form of at-risk behavior later on. It's identified. We can identify it at an early age.
Exactly.
But the question then becomes, how do we intervene earlier to prevent the hell and the torture that you had to go through dealing with all of those things?
Right.
But we know that now, but it's a question of the resources, and you look to see we haven't even been able to hire enough counselors in the schools. But you said it, Jim, it's like what the will of the people in the community. What do we want to support?
Right.
Are we going to fight for this? Are we going to do things and ask our town leaders to help and support us with this?
And we've seen just with our involvement with the task force, we have great minds around the table, and being one of them. We have a number of people from different disciplines, and the schools have been very supportive of this. But you're right. You can only ask people like the police to do more and more and more with less and less for so long.
Right.
And at some point, you have to say, do we have the will, write the check, get more services out there to battle this #1 health epidemic or not? How are we going to solve this? So, Mandy, I want to thank you so much for being here. Thank you doesn't seem to cover it.
Thank you.
We're so happy and proud to see you doing so well. And if I could adopt your kids, as my honorary grandchildren, I would, because they are something else.
Thank you. But you were so courageous to come on. It really is. It is an act of courage to come on, and it's an act of doing something to make a difference.
Sure is.
And We thank you so much.
Thank
really.
you.
Thank you. If you or somebody you know needs help, please don't hesitate to call the SAFE Coalition at our support line. We can be reached at 508-488-8105. You can also find information about the coalition at www.safecoalitionma.org. We can also be followed on Facebook or Twitter. So for our guests Mandy Lerner and Dr. Ann Bergen, my name is Jim Derrick saying thanks for watching.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.